Morning. Let me tell you what's going to happen this morning. If you look on the front of your worship folder, you'll notice that there is, after the message, which we'll begin now, we'll begin a series called Serenity Now. And then we'll look at that over the course of the next 3 weeks. Following the message, we're going to deal with a couple questions. And we, in the past, have had times once per year where we bring people up to speed with what's happening at Hope. Before, we've done it at the end of the service in a different meeting. And last year, we tried something different, which is let's make a shorter report and incorporate it into the service. That does a couple things. Children are taken care of, and so they're in their children's ministry. And so that seemed to be a good thing. We could communicate these things briefly and offer a time for question and answers afterwards for those who want more detail. And the third thing, that you might not know this, but if you come here, you're part of us. The church is people. We don't have an elaborate organization. You don't have to jump through hoops in order to be part of what's happening here. If you're here and choose to be here, you're a part. So we just want to let you know about some things that might interest you and might not. But I would encourage you to hang around, and we'll deal with a few questions, and then we'll be completed within our regular time frame. We're talking about search for serenity. Serenity, all of us are looking for it. We may look for it in different places, but we are all looking for the same thing. Again, we might look in different spots, in achievement or in personal peace. Where do you look for serenity? How would you answer that question? When you want to promote a sense of serenity, where do you go? What do? Do you withdraw by yourself? Do you go be with people? Do you go to work? Do you come from work? Do you spend time with your family? If you were to say, where do you look for serenity? I think we might all agree that serenity is tough to find and tougher to keep. If there were ever a place where serenity would seem to have been safeguarded, it would have been in paradise, in the Garden of Eden. Even there, it slipped away. When you think of it, there was a perfect world. No abuse, no war, no neglect, nothing that makes this world we live in an uncomfortable place that saps our serenity. There was nothing in the world that would cause one to not be serene. Everything was good. And what we find there in that Eden, in that place of paradise, serenity slips away. Even before Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, serenity had already been siphoned off. If you remember, before they ate the fruit, serenity had slipped away. The serpent was able to introduce doubts concerning God's character. And those doubts concerning God's character became viruses that began to siphon off serenity. And that's interesting, isn't it? In a perfect world, before the mind was tainted by sin, serenity had leached away. Very difficult to find and very difficult to keep. Serenity was the first casualty of the doubts introduced by the serpent. And so I think what we might say, the entrance of sin was preceded by the exit of serenity. That works, doesn't it? If you look at the cause and effect, would you agree? As serenity was ushered out, sin was ushered in. You buy that? I think it makes sense. And this happened even before, again, serenity out, sin in. Now we live east of Eden. We don't live in a perfect world. Serenity is tougher to find and tougher to keep. The Serenity Prayer was penned in a time of global war. It was written by Reinhold Niebuhr in 1943. There was a book that I picked up this week at the library by his daughter, Elizabeth Sifton, who wrote a book called The Serenity Prayer. Her dad was a German, but he was an American pastor, and he served in Heath, Massachusetts, a place where a number of ministry individuals would come during the summers, and this small church expanded into a place where many clergy were. He was a prolific writer, Reinhold Niebuhr was, and he ended up becoming a seminary professor. In the summer of 43, he wrote this prayer, which was used in the war. It had that sense of clear thinking that distinguished it as something to be remembered. 10 years after it was penned, I think approximately, Alcoholics Anonymous took it into their material, and with Reinhold Niebuhr's blessing, changed it a little bit. But here it is in its original form, in 1943. And what we find, God, give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things that should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. I think if you know the Serenity Prayer as it's penned commonly today, a few changes. It's in fact, when we look at God give us, when it was originally penned, it was an us thing. It wasn't just a me thing. It wasn't grant me serenity. It was give us something, and it was give us grace. That's the way it started. Give us grace to accept with serenity. Elizabeth Sifton writes, she is Reinhold Niebuhr's daughter who wrote this book. She published this book in 2003. But the Serenity Prayer was composed in wartime. It also addresses the inconsolable pain, loss, and guilt that war afflicts on the communities that wage it. It goes to the heart of the possibilities and impossibilities of collective action for collective betterment. So what she's saying, her father was a political activist, interestingly enough. And we're trying to find a platform to understand this prayer and what it meant. He was not a pacifist, but an activist. He was a thinking Christian who felt that faith in God should affect the way we do things politically. So he was very active. And he understood that to do the things that bettering the world requires is not something that can be done alone. That's why he said, give us, and give us grace. You'll notice that another thing, the things that should be changed. I believe the Serenity Prayer goes, God grant us serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. So it goes from courage to change the things we can to courage to change the things that should be changed. A little bit of a difference there. Do you see that? Not just courage to change the things we can, but courage to change the things that should be changed. She writes, from what should be changed, it's been evolved, and what she will say that AA uses it well, but she notices that there's a difference from what should be changed to what can be changed. This both invites one to change what shouldn't be changed and to not change what should be changed. It shifts from a strong idea, courage to change the things that should be changed, to one that is not as strong, courage to change the things that can be changed. I can't change it, so I'm not going to try. And what he would have said is that there's things that should be changed even though they're difficult to change. The search for serenity, then, involves serene acceptance. That's part of it. To accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. Accepting something and accepting something with serenity are two different issues, aren't they? We can accept things out of powerless resignation. There's learned hopelessness. I can't do anything, so I'll just abide by it and see, and that's not what it's indicating. That's acceptance. But acceptance with agitation. And what he says is give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. Not just serene acceptance, but courageous involvement. Grant us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. Courage to change the things that should be changed. And again, there's a sense of strength, strong idea, and wise discernment. When do you have one and when do you have the other? When is it a case of the need for serene acceptance? When is the time for courageous involvement in changing something that should be changed? She, again, writes, I quote, "All too often the Serenity Prayer has been construed as a way to say something clever about life's difficulties, rather than as a true petition for grace and wisdom in an impossible world. But she says, though I think most AA members understand it rightly. Perhaps it's that for many people, praying is a kind of reassuring, pleasant activity, which in itself they find soothing. The contribution and renunciation that one must experience to arrive at real hope or assurance isn't part of the scheme." What she's saying then is assurance and hope require not just calm serenity, but courageous involvement. And that's why her father, as Elizabeth Sifton writes, wrote circulars and wrote back to his fatherland about anti-Semitism in his 20s. He wrote circulars and petitioned the government at that time, alerting them to what they were doing with the anti-Semitic strain that he found coming. He wrote prolifically. Why? There were some things that agitated him. And he found those things, some which he needed to deal with serene acceptance, but some called for speaking up with a voice that was effective and courageous and involved to bring an end to something that should be brought an end to. She writes finally, "In an inanely immoral, frivolous, and profit-driven world, we may lose the ability to hear such a prayer." She talks about an amoral, profit-driven world. We might lose the ability to hear such a prayer. God give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. Courage to change the things that should be changed. And wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. As we look back over history, and when we think of where we are now, this was penned in the middle of World War II at a time of global conflict. That was the context in which the Serenity Prayer is birthed by a German, nonetheless, living in Massachusetts. When we look back over history, as we think of our civilization now, we are involved in wars. The last wars America has been involved in have been off of our soil. Back in the mid-19th century, we had one on our soil, but by and large, for the last 150, 60 years, we have not had a war on our soil, and therefore have been able to build factories, and we have had the opportunity. Again, we were involved in some global conflicts, World War I, World War II. But when you think of the ability we have to be able to focus on the enrichment of life, as you look back over history with kingdoms that are powerful, were powerful, and were able to leverage an experience of peace into a consideration of how to enrich life that had both tools and time to focus on making life better for those within the kingdom, you're going to come up with a handful of kingdoms, not very many. Israel in 1000 BC is one of them. Under King Solomon, it was the golden age for Israel. They had peace within their borders. They extended their borders. They had a king who was both politically, intellectually, very sophisticated. And he took full advantage of time and resources. He was able to develop such a quality of life in Israel that individuals, foreign dignitaries who came there, left awestruck at what they experienced there. Just mouth agape. Not just opulence, but wisdom. Just the general sense of, whoa, this would be a great place to live. Interestingly enough, that's Solomon, who penned many proverbs, psalms, left us with a journal. And the journal is a search for serenity. It's in the Old Testament of the Bible, called the book of Ecclesiastes. Open your Bible sometime to the book of Ecclesiastes. You'll find the journal of a very smart, politically astute leader in a golden age who is looking for serenity, and he looks in three directions. He looks inside, outside, and up. And let's follow along. Let's listen to what he says briefly. Look what it says in your worship folder in terms of what he says about looking in. Again, these are his words. It's his memoir, the memoir of a search for serenity. That's what he says. I thought to myself, look, I've grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. That's not brag, that's just fact. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. He learned about human nature. He wanted to know all about it. And he goes on, but I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. He had the time and resources to enrich his internal world, and he came up short. We can try to change our inner world to find serenity with education, pleasure, laughter, trying to bring about things that make our mind a better place to walk around in, which are noble, appropriate pursuits. This is important. But what we find here with this guy is that he came up short. He looked for serenity, but didn't find it in internal regulation. He experienced a lot of good things, but when the dust cleared, he said, it's a chasing after wind. I went after something, I went after serenity, tried to find it in internal enrichment, and came up short. And that makes sense, though, doesn't it? Because if we look back to the garden, even in a mind untainted by sin, it was not possible to keep serenity. He didn't just look in, he looked out. Let's read again from his memoir. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the first few days of their life. So he gets a place of, okay, boy, you know what, I'm tired of personal enrichment. I know what I'll do. I need to accomplish some things. I need to change not my inner world, but my outer world. I need to contribute to what's happening outside. So no more introspection, extrospection. Is that a word? I don't even know it's a word. But anyways, you know what I mean. He focused from in to out, and this is what he says. I undertook great projects. I made gardens and parks. I planted all kinds of trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delight of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. And what it's saying is that he did all these things, but he didn't become a cement head. He kept his faculties. He was able to determine what is and is not true, which is an interesting thing. He says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work. And this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Not only did he have the time and resources to enrich his internal world, he had the time and resources to enrich his external world, but once again he came up short. We can try to find serenity in changing not our inner world, but our outer world. I need to build things. I need to live a legacy. And things outside of our inner thoughts, things outside. He did so, was able to do that with intelligence and discernment, and he came up empty. That makes sense too, because even in a world untainted by war, abuse, and neglect, in the Garden of Eden, they still couldn't find and keep serenity. He goes one more direction at the end of his memoir. And again, if you read it, the first 11 chapters are this guy, and the thing you hear this guy talking about is pursuit. And at the end saying, chasing after wind. I was chasing something like wind. You can never catch it. And that's what finding serenity was like. Just, you feel it. You feel the direction of it, wind. When you go out, it's been really windy. You go out, you know where the wind is coming from, and it impacts you. You feel it, don't you? It blows on your shirt, but you feel it, but you can't catch it. And that's what he did. That's what trying to find serenity was like. And finally, he says, remember him, God, before the silver cord is severed, or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, or the wheel broken at the well. The dust returns to the ground it came from. The spirit returns to God who gave it. He comes up and says, when the dust clears, really, taking God seriously is critical to serenity. I think that's what he's indicating. And back to the prayer. That's what's interesting. Not God give us serenity alone, but it says God give us grace. Serenity is a function of the grace God gives. Serenity is a function of the grace God gives. By that measure, so is courage and wisdom. Functions of the grace God gives. That's how the prayer originally puts it. God give us the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things that should be changed, and wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. A life marked by serenity, courage, and wisdom will require us to look up and cultivate our connection with God and His grace as undeserved favor. This has been Hope Church's passion from the beginning. It was started with a question, really about 14 years ago now. Hope Church became with a question in the middle of very deep heartache. What would it be like to talk about grace as much as the Bible does? It's a question that Mark Lordson, Doug Anderson, J.C. Chambers, elders from the beginning, Terry Nordstrom, Denise Hare as elders who came on, and others who have served and walked through this thing and in this experiment. What would happen if you let grace be as big as it is in the Bible? What happens if you don't take off the load 1 week and put it on week 2 through 5, and then take it off week 6, which is what I find? Now, you've got to address behavior, but the Bible would indicate that grace teaches us to say no to ungodliness. What would happen if we said that over and over and over and over and over and over again? What would happen? Well, let me ask you. And you might come up with stuff that's not plus, a lot of plus and minuses. What happens? Hope is and has always been message driven. That's why. And the thing that's frustrating about hope, and there's things that are frustrating here, maybe you find it frustrating, is that we're always pointing the finger inside ourselves. You're never going to come here and hear somebody talk about how much better we are than them. And sometimes you might hunger for that. I'm just being honest. It might be nice to be able to have you here. You guys are so much better than those out there. And there's a sense of, yeah, I like that. That it does feel good, doesn't it? Will it promote serenity? You know the answer to that, don't you? No, it will not. Serenity comes from trying to figure ourselves out, and that can be frustrating at Hope. We're always pointing the finger inside. You know why? We really want to promote change. We all need it. All of us are searching for serenity, and there's people that go to church that really aren't looking for change. You know what they want? Make me feel good. Say something to make me feel good. Compare me with them. And does that feel good? Yeah, it feels good. For how long? And would you call that feel-good serenity? No, you wouldn't. I got a question for you. We're going to deal with some questions, but I'm going to have you deal with the question on your own. I want you to sit and think. Now, again, if you're here, you're part of this place, whether you want to be or not. What words would you use to describe the message that you hear every week at Hope? What words would you use? I'm going to give you some time to think about this. And a second question. What impact has it made in your life? I want you to think. What words would you use to describe the message? You might take a pencil, write some down. what impact has it had? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Think about what words you would use to describe the message that you hear at Hope. And here's some words that I don't want to see. Dumb. Don't say dumb. You know what I mean? And just think, what impact has that had in your life? And then what I'm going to have you do, again, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to provide some time for you to stand up for a second and maybe share some of your responses with someone next to you. What words would you use? What words did you use? What would you come up with? Oh, that's a good word. And what changes has it made in your life? Well, it's done this with me. Yeah, and maybe you'll find some people who have been impacted as you have. Okay, so here we go. I got to get my, again, we're going to have you out of here in time. Here we go. I got the clock. I want you to take and think about, some of you have been at Hope a long time. Some of you have been at Hope not a long time. We don't do a bunch of stuff here, so if you're here because of the message. We have good children's ministry and some good ministries. We don't have a bunch of stuff. So if you hear the message is probably a big reason. You say, there's something different about it. Okay, how would you describe it? Okay, Mike, shut up and let him think. Okay. Give you a couple minutes. Minute 30 seconds. What words and what impact? Think about that as well. You've got a minute. How has the message impacted you? Okay, everybody stand up. You know what I'd like you to do? Again, I'm not going to come and check, but if you're near somebody, you just might, what words did you use? What words did you use? Why don't you compare words and talk just a little bit about, if some of you have, yeah, here's how it experienced me. Go talk to one another, okay? Somebody give you a couple minutes to do that. A couple minutes. Sorry, Gal. If there's somebody close to you and they're not talking to anybody, pull them over. Say, come on over here. Give you another 2 minutes. Less than a minute. Okay? Everybody have a seat. Terrific. Who makes Hope Church work? And believe it or not, Hope Church doesn't work just because a couple people take time for a half a day on Sunday, which is kind of the minister thing. Well, yeah, you work half a day on Sunday. Who makes Hope Church work? Different individuals, children's ministry, the coordinators, nursery 0 to 3, Shelley Logue, preschool, Lisa Holtman, elementary, Marcia Gaudette. Great preschool staff. Student ministry, Joel Fredrickson, he's not here. I think I'm going to have these people stand up at the end. Event operation, those are the people that transform this place from a school into a place where we can have our meeting together. Dan and Sharon Bethke are the coordinators. The transformation team, usher team, special events team, communion setup and information table attendant is part of that team. Worship, coordinators Sheila Kittleson and Jesse Johnson, drama and programming. Coordinate that, work with Sue Jacob, who's the team lead for that. Media team, audiovisual team, Gavin Godez, Spence Kittleson, Nate Kittleson. I think their names went in there today, right? Okay, cool. Been nice though, hasn't it? We've said after Dave Miller, are we going to be able to hear each other? We have been. Randy McCoy. Did I just do something wrong there? How come they laughed at that, Randy? Is that about you or about me? Okay. Oh, they're back there. I can't hear, so. Okay. Care team leader, Lisa Murphy. When individuals have needs and for meals and stuff like that. We could go on and on. A prayer team leaders, Barry Breifogel, Sue Jacobs. Katrina team leader, Ann Dodes, who is also on the board of directors, has a passion to come alongside people in need, and we benefit from her passion. Banquet team leader, Michelle Anderson, we go to the banquet several times a year. She coordinates that effort. Card making team leader, Loretta Hyatt, and she did the cards that we get to remind us of birthdays that we don't want to be reminded of sometimes. That's nothing against you, Loretta. Probably more about me. Okay. Office staff, administrative assistant, Jesse Johnson, who is cutting back hours now since she has to juggle 3 kids. If that makes sense, doesn't it? We're so glad, though, to be able to have her experience and for her to give us the time that she's able to give us. Financial manager Brian King, who was busy this morning putting slides. No, he's not just this morning, but he's going to have a short presentation. And it's going to be short. He's saying, I was thinking of importing some jokes because so a guy who can take information and make it simple. We appreciate Brian tremendously. Office volunteer Tamara McFarland, who volunteers time to put things together. Who makes Hope Church work? Some leadership teams. Some of these individuals who I mentioned are coordinators. If you're a coordinator, would you stand up? And don't clap for these people yet, because they'll get embarrassed. Okay, these are different. Okay, now that they're standing, let's clap. Okay. That's called bait and switch. That's what that's called. Directors, they're the ones that are those who make sure that we manage our finances in a strategic way. If you're on the board of directors, would you stand? We have an individual that you will meet in upcoming weeks. David Mao is going to be a new member of the board of directors. David, are you here this morning? Right here. There he is. Okay, David. You can stand up as well, and we'll meet you. Okay. And the elders, again, you can tell a lot about, when Hope was born, I recall times, there was a meeting when the previous church I had been involved in was disintegrating, and there was a very difficult meeting, and I'll never forget going to a difficult meeting and Doug saying, I'm going to sit across the table from you, Mike, so you can look at me. And he gave me a ride there and back. JC and Lori Chambers. I can't go in, yeah. It was very difficult. And the union that exists between, especially those who are elders and those who are in from the beginning, and not just elders in from the beginning, I could talk about the maybe, and if I go on, I'm going to forget names. But let me just focus on the elders for now. J.C. Chambers and Lord, when things were difficult, I remember they came over one night, stayed till 12. And J.C.'s been a faithful friend. Mark Lauritsen, I remember when we were in my living room, and this was 14 years ago, and then feeling like, gosh, what do we, and Mark said, he looked at me, Mark has these penetrating eyes, and he says these things that, with that, he goes, we're going for a ride. And it was mechanical, and it was, the car thing, so it all works out. But just the clarity, the sense of commitment. Terry Nordstrom, we were talking once as elders, and he came when I was involved in this other church, and he said, boy, the thing I really appreciate about Mike was that I had to leave the church early, and he was out there to greet me when I left. And, I greet people when they leave now, but I didn't do it for a while. And what we laughed as elders is I wasn't greeting people who was leaving, I was running out. And I just happened to see him. But Terry is, if we have somebody who was raised up within the ministry who has become a leader from the ground up, it's Terry. Denise and Dave here. I'm going to talk about both of them. As a couple, I met them in Farmore. For a while I called them Steve and Diane. So on a number of different things in terms of structure. And again, I work very closely with Denise and have JC. In fact, JC, come on up. He's going to describe, as we continue to staff to make sure that we're able to do the things that we need to do. JC is going to talk about elders and about a position we're creating. So I'll...
Come on, man, I want to hip hop a little bit. There we go. All right, good morning. Yeah. I just want to be real quick. They asked me to speak about elders. And what we do is that 5 or 6 of us, we've met forever. And our commission is to guard the message and to guard the direction of the church. Okay, so the 5 folks that Mike identified are people who, first of all, have been serving, because our goal isn't to be the eggheads of the group or to be the most spiritual. We've been serving, and we get together to sort of make sure that we're staying close to the message, make sure that we're staying tight to what God has given us, okay? Now, there are several of us elders who no longer function so much on the day-to-day. Meaning there's a couple of us that come alongside and add to the direction of the church, but we're not in the church office. And then there's a couple of elders that are in the day-to-day mix, okay? And probably, 3 years ago, was it, or maybe 4 years ago or whatever, Mike went to China. Mike and Marcia and his family went to China. And we set a precedent in that sense that we reorganized, and there were 3 elders, 3 or 4, all of us elders reassigned our position. But we actually had an administrative elder. It was Mark Lauritsen who did that for us, and he was the coordinator, kind of handled communication, but he was sort of the hub of the wheel. And then there were 3 of us that committed time to preaching. And those are things that we are kind of above and beyond the call of duty. And so what we had done at that time was to agree that if we get called to go above and beyond the call of duty, we would compensate the folks. So Mark and Doug and myself, as we preached, and Mark did other things, we received a little bit of compensation. But more importantly, we were able to reshape our role to meet the needs of the church. Well, we're in a new situation right now, and we have a need for someone who can. Now, you understand the elder board. When I said we're not nerds, that was a lie. We probably 4 of us are all bookworm nerds of different kinds of books and stuff. And then we have this, I don't want to say fluke, but we have this lady that's with us that has this other gifting, and she has this ability to understand the needs of folks, but also have to understand the needs of how important it is to communicate and touch base with other people. So I want to call Denise up because what we want to present to you is that we've decided to go back to an administrative elder whose primary function is communication, whose secondary function is networking and disciple making. So we've asked Denise to take that position, and so I'm going to turn the mic over so she can tell you a little bit about what that means specifically.
Thanks for not calling me a fluke. I don't think he did he? Or was it a little indirect? I'm going to make this really brief, but it's important to me that you know what my heart for hope is. I have a big heart for hope because hope has made a tremendous difference in Dave's and my life by changing our heart. And I feel very certain that hope belongs to God. I know that we wouldn't be in existence if he hadn't provided for that. And I feel very certain that without his resources, we wouldn't continue to be in existence. So first of all, I know that it belongs to him. And some of the resources that I see him providing, number one, he does reveal himself here. I very much agree. We are message focused, and the message is effective. It's relevant. That's a word I heard when we were discussing this earlier this morning. It makes a difference. It ends up changing hearts, not just short-term behavior, but long-term thoughts about who he is. I also know this is his church because he has provided for us materially. I wasn't in on the first months of Hope, but I think we had like $400, if I remember the story correctly. You don't start churches with that if God doesn't want it to go. But the other resource that he has generously provided is that of people. That, to me, is a resource that I'm pretty passionate about. I have to refer here and make sure it's in Romans where it says, "So in Christ, we who are many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others." That is a pretty strong statement of connection. Not just that we need each other, but that we belong to one another. And that's where my passion lies. My hope is that my involvement will serve to support those who are already intentionally focusing on connecting each of us to the other, and also to support programs, perhaps develop, and a strong element of that will be communication. We're already starting on some changes with the website and worship folder, how to make sure that you can't be included if you don't know. So that's one of the main goals.
Sure, you can clap. I have worked and will continue to work closely with Denise, so in terms of her coming to this position, it's not doing something she hasn't been doing. It's just kind of sanctioning something she's already done. We work closely, and so I look forward to that continued involvement and being able to allow her to be able to give the time to be able to do the things she's passionate about, and we'll all benefit because of that. Where's Hope Church going? Let me say a couple things about that. Where are we going in terms of location? In May 18th, again, as you think of coming into O'Gorman, let me see if I have this thing up here, is the main entrance, and there's some people there. I don't know who they are, so there they are. Okay. We are going to be going through this entrance, not next week. Do we go in this entrance next week? No, no way do we. What will happen if we go to this entrance? Okay, shut up, Mike, just keep going. Okay, do we go in that entrance? Give yourself a hand. No, don't. This is insulting. I'm insulting. No, I'm not. I just want to make sure. We want to be as clear as we can. So that's what we'll do. We'll be able to go through this entrance here. And, okay. This is, holy smokes, this is the main parking lot. And again, here's where we will go in. If you continue around the building this way, around to the left, we will be entering, those with limited mobility will be going in here. This is the part of the facility that we will begin to meet on May 18th. Let me show you what that looks like. This is what, when you come around the building, this is what it looks like, and limited mobility parking will be right here, which will be better. So you won't have to park in back over there and walk through the mud. That'll be stronger. It's going to be a gym. We'll set up chairs. We'll have the tables. We'll have much the same stuff. It'll feel a little bit different, but you'll be able to see each other a little bit more. It'll be an interesting change. I think it'll be. And this is what that entrance looks like. Again, you come from the outside. So you can enter from this direction, which is around the building. Not a bunch of parking. Probably better to enter here. Okay. Where's Hope Church going? Gathering together, that's where we're going. Let me give you a sense of this is an immediate, short-term provision. O'Gorman really wants to work with us. They're glad to have us be here again. I told you they like to have us here because we don't cause them any problems. We are looking for a long-term relocation solution. Let me tell you what that is. There was a church that we thought was going to want to sell, and we looked at it and we met a little bit and tried to, this might work, and then they decided that they didn't want to sell. But they might decide to sell. And as we hear things, we'll pass them on. We're still praying, God, show us the place. We would like to be able to relocate. We're moving in that direction, feel like it will happen. There's another possibility that a builder is going to build a building and lease to us. We're going to explore that. As we have current stuff, we will let you know. We're trusting God for that. However, I will say that we're not tied to facility. This is where we meet, it's where we gather. But we're really about spreading out. Spreading out. Gathering together is important. We have to see to this. But in terms of the plans, what we will always do is think about how can we be better stewards of the message. I think what we talk about here is important. I think it helps people, and as it gets out, how can we do that better? Can we do it with website better? That's one of the things that we're going to be addressing. We already do. We go to different countries with it. China, there'll be another China trip. Doug just got back. And there'll be another fall trip for him, and there'll be a fall trip for me. So we export these things, and we're thinking in terms of publishing materials, and how else can we get the message out? In terms of our programming, how we can do that. So that's what we continue, because that's really what we serve. God has given us a message. We feel like it's important. And when he gives us a message, he gives it to us for a reason. Not that we could keep it, but we pass it out. We don't want everybody to come to this church. You know what I'd like to do? I'd really like to be able to take the message we have here. That's where I really want to spread out. And insert it elsewhere. If we have materials or websites so that individuals in other places can have access to this, they don't even have to come. If they come, fine. But I want to, let's get the message out and have people know that you can use grace and change behavior. It ultimately is the only thing that does. I think there's a bunch of people that need to know what we're learning. And so we will continue to do that. Where is Hope going financially? Brian, come on up. And I haven't left him enough room for the jokes. Here you go, Brian. Right there.
Hello.
Can I say this about Brian? Again, he came, he's on as the financial manager. What he did a couple of years ago, he said, you know what, Mike, what I'd like to do? I would like to keep more careful records of what we spend, money we bring in, so that we could chart trends. And he makes very pretty graphs. And that's what and at the directors, he makes us look smart, which is what the board of directors has to do. Somebody has to make us look smart. Okay, shut up, Mike.
That's all right. Can you hear this? There we go. I was supposed to email the PowerPoint slides, and I did email Mike, but forgot to attach the plan or the PowerPoint. So it's not your fault. You gave up the remote too easily. Anybody that knows anything about remotes at home, you got to hold on to it. So, but until they get that set up, Carrie and I, my wife Carrie, some of you know her, went to a play last night, and it was an 80s play, and I thought, just to kill time, that I'd help
Is this going to work?
Help you remember. Is it going to set up?
We're trying to find it. What's it under?
It's just, I just saved it right under the if you open it up, it should be a PowerPoint. The only PowerPoint, actually. So, but anyway, the thing with statistics in general is they are quite boring, and they tell their own story. So you have to come up with a word really to interpret what the graphs or the data is telling you. And I was thinking that was something about the 80s that was interesting, as we came up with all of our, our own, to some extent, our own language to describe emotion. So some of the words, obviously, like righteous, bodacious, hellacious, things like that. I didn't use any of those words for the PowerPoint, but,
I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's do this. Give us a verbal, and what we'll do, we're going to break, and we have some refreshments. Loretta and her team have put some refreshments together. I think we'll do this. Give us a quick verbal. Some of us really don't care. Verbal synopsis. So what we'll do, we'll get. I didn't mean us. I care, Brian. I care. I really care. But what we'll do, we'll get those slides set up, and what we're going to do, go get some food, come back in for questions and answers. We'll get that queued up by then, and then we'll show up there. Brian, how are we doing financially?
Well,
give us a quick verbal.
There are a couple categories we typically track. Is attendance, first of all. And basically the word I came up with for that is stable. Our attendance is stabilized. We did see some decrease, and really, you could say that we may be even increasing in attendance, but over the long trend, it appears more stable, typically between 190 and 210 as far as attendance, weekly attendance. As far as the weekly giving is concerned, again, that the other word for that is stabilized. Again, we did see a lot of increased giving over the last several years, and it appears that has also stabilized. And again, no sign of any decreasing there. Number of givers per week also seems to be stabilized. Again, statistics are not very interesting.
No, it's
but
really
they tell a
interesting.
story, and we need to watch for different trends. But we did see it actually increase in number of people giving each week over the course of last year.
We got a proposed budget, Brian. Where are we? The proposed
as
budget?
far as
Again, it's not finished. We have some more I's to dot, T's to cross. Where is it?
Well,
is it
I mean,
up, down?
obviously the impact this year with the change in venue and the resource center and those sort of things changed the budget pretty dramatically compared to the previous year. There's a couple areas, payroll, office, ministry areas, and I guess you could say where we pay our lease or rent, that sort of thing, changed significantly. So really we saw no change in payroll, general office. We saw a slight increase in ministry areas, but the largest impact was our resource center and O'Gorman. And basically, it was probably maybe a 7% decrease in costs associated with that. And as a proposal, we have proposed that that be moved over, still allocated, but moved over to our reserve and our building fund.
So the money we save on O'Gorman and the Resource Center, we're going to put that aside in a fund and earmark either towards the reserve or the building fund. So we'll see that increase.
Yep. Yeah, so as far as weekly need is concerned, there really is no change there. Our budget is pretty much a 0% growth for the next fiscal year. And then, so as far as the weekly need, it's still about $3,700 a week. So, yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Brian. Great. Sharon Mork is on the board of directors. Sharon, come on up. I'm going to close this in prayer. Thanks, Sharon.
Mike called me on Tuesday morning and asked me if I would come up this morning and close us in prayer, and since then, I've just really been focusing on, God, what do you want me to say? You know, what is it that we as your people, your body, need to hear? And amazingly, all week long, different things have come into my mind, and one of them is that, you know, I'm the master architect, I'm the master planner. With a word, I created the world. I hung billions of stars in place, gave them all a name. And I hold the universe in the palm of my hand. And I can do far greater things than any of you can ever imagine. You say that in your word. I can do far greater things. And then he also said to me this morning driving over here, this came into my mind. He said, remember when I had the 5,000 and my disciples said, send them home. We can't feed them. But with a couple of loaves and a couple fish, I said, I fed 5,000 men. And each time I would go to him in prayer, I just felt so strongly that the prayer he wants is for us to bind together as one, united in heart and mind, and know and understand and have the faith that he can do far greater things for us than we could ever imagine. And I'd just like to, in my prayer, also remind us that he said, be anxious about nothing, but in everything, in prayer and petition, make your requests be made known unto God. And he talked about with thanksgiving. And I guess I think this morning that our prayer needs to be that we just bind together in faith, knowing that he's going to do something that's God-sized, and that we don't know it and we don't understand it, but that he wants us to put our faith in him, our trust in him, and not be anxious, and understand that he's going to take care of us. So with that, precious Father, we just do thank you so much that as Mike often says, you're large and in charge, and that you care for us, and that you love us, and that you are the master architect, and that you have a plan. Father, we just ask that you would increase our faith and help us to look to you, help us to gaze at you and not at our circumstances. And Father, in this, we give you thanks for the opportunity that you've set before us. And we ask, Father, that you just speak to each one of us, and that at the end of the day, we will be found faithful. I just thank you for your love, and we ask this in the name of your one and only beloved Son, Jesus. Amen.
Thanks, Sharon. Hey, so what we do? Good. That works. Thanks, Sharon. Okay, great. Why don't you go? We got some finger foods out there and some refreshments. If you want to grab something and grab the kids, then if you care to, come on back in. The elders are going to be here. We'll address any questions that you might have. If I don't see you